When I was young, I thought losing someone would kill me. I truly believed that. I thought if I ever lost the people I loved most, I would simply stop being able to breathe, stop being able to live, stop being me. Now I'm 97 years old, and a week ago I came home from another funeral. I stood beside another casket. I listened to another goodbye. I watched another person I loved disappear from this world. And then I came back home, sat down in my favorite chair, looked out the window, and realized something that would have shocked the younger version of me. I am still here, not because losing people doesn't hurt. It does. God, it does. But because I finally learned that fear is often heavier than loss itself. My name is Helen. I'm 97 years old, and I have buried more people than I can count. Some died suddenly, some died slowly, some simply drifted away until one day they became strangers. I have lost friends, family members, neighbors, classmates, and people I once thought I couldn't survive without. Yet for most of my life I wasn't actually living. I was worrying. I was terrified that everyone I loved would leave me. The strange thing is that my fear started very early. I was only 10 years old when I first understood that people don't stay forever. My grandmother was the first person I ever lost. She smelled like cinnamon and roses. Every Sunday, she would hold my hand while we walked to church. I thought she would always be there. Children believe that. They think the people they love are permanent. Then one winter morning, my father sat me down at the kitchen table. I still remember the look on his face. I knew something was wrong before he even spoke. When he told me Grandma had died in her sleep, the world suddenly felt unsafe. For the first time, I understood that love could be taken away. That realization followed me for decades. As a teenager, I worried constantly about my parents. If they were late coming home, I imagined terrible accidents. If they got sick, I couldn't sleep. I became an expert at expecting tragedy. Then I met Robert, the love of my life. I was 22 years old when I first saw him. He had the kindest eyes I had ever seen, the kind that made you feel safe. For a while, he made my fears disappear. I thought maybe love could protect me from loss. Maybe if I loved someone enough, life would leave them alone. What a foolish thing to believe. Robert and I built a beautiful life together. We bought a small house, raised children, shared birthdays, Christmas mornings, arguments, laughter, and countless ordinary days that seemed insignificant at the time. But those ordinary days would later become my most treasured memories. Because ordinary days are the first thing you miss when someone is gone. Not the vacations, not the celebrations. Just hearing their footsteps in the hallway, hearing their voice from another room, knowing they're still somewhere inside the house. For years I lived with a quiet fear that I tried to hide. Every time Robert left for work, I worried. Every time he drove somewhere, I worried. Every time he caught a cold, I worried. I wasted thousands of beautiful moments being afraid of losing the very things I was trying to enjoy, and life kept teaching me the same lesson. One by one, people disappeared. My father died, then my mother. Friends moved away. Some friendships faded. Others ended because life simply pulled us in different directions. Every loss felt like another piece of my world breaking off. I remember sitting alone after my mother's funeral. I was already in my 50s, far too old to feel like an orphan, yet that's exactly how I felt, like a little girl again, afraid, unprepared. I cried for hours that night, not only because my mother was gone, but because I suddenly realized something terrifying. The people who knew my entire story were disappearing. The people who remembered me as a child. The people who knew where I came from. The people who remembered my first mistakes, first dreams, and first heartbreaks. They were leaving, and I couldn't stop it. That was the hardest part, not the grief, the helplessness, the understanding that no amount of love can keep someone here forever. For years I fought that truth. I resisted it. I feared it. I hated it. But life wasn't finished teaching me yet, because the greatest losses of my life were still ahead of me. And when they came, they would change everything I believed about love, fear, and what it truly means to survive. I didn't know it then. But the woman who was terrified of losing people was about to learn a lesson that would take nearly a century to understand. The worst day of my life did not begin with bad news. It began like every other ordinary Tuesday. The sun came up. Coffee brewed in the kitchen. The birds outside my window sang their usual songs. Robert kissed me on the forehead before leaving the house, and neither of us knew it would be the last time. That's the cruel thing about loss. Most of the time it doesn't announce itself. There is no warning, no countdown, no voice from heaven saying, "Pay attention, this moment matters." Life simply moves forward, and then suddenly it doesn't. Robert died when I was 73. Even now, 24 years later, saying those words feels strange. How can someone be the center of your world for over 50 years and then become a memory? I still don't fully understand it. One moment he was here, the next moment he wasn't. People often ask what grief feels like. I can only describe it this way. Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that the world has lost its color. Everything is still there. The furniture, the walls, the streets, the trees. But somehow everything feels empty, like a stage after the audience has gone home. For months after Robert died, I reached for him without thinking. I would turn to tell him something funny. Then remember. I would hear a noise in the house and expect to see him. Then remember. I would wake up in the middle of the night and reach across the bed. Then remember. Every day felt like losing him all over again. People told me time would heal me. I know they meant well, but grief doesn't work that way. Time doesn't heal. Time teaches. There is a difference. The pain doesn't disappear. You simply learn how to carry it. Some days I carried it well. Other days it carried me. The loneliness was unbearable. After 51 years of marriage, silence became my enemy. I started leaving the television on just to hear another voice in the house. Not because I was watching it, because I couldn't stand the quiet. The quiet reminded me that Robert was gone. But life wasn't finished testing me. A few years later, one of my closest friends died. Then another. Then another. The women I had laughed with, traveled with, shared secrets with, raised children alongside. One by one, they disappeared. Every funeral became a little more familiar, and that frightened me. I remember standing in a cemetery one afternoon, looking around at the faces gathered there. Most of us had gray hair. Most of us walked a little slower than we used to. And for the first time, I realized something. We weren't just attending funerals anymore. We were becoming the people others would someday attend funerals for. That thought stayed with me for weeks, because growing old is strange. When you're young, you spend your life looking forward. At 97, much of your life exists behind you. You become a keeper of memories, a witness to people who no longer exist anywhere except inside your heart. Then came another kind of loss, one I wasn't prepared for, the loss of people who were still alive. Sometimes people don't die, sometimes they simply leave. Some relatives stopped calling, some friendships faded. Some people became so busy living their own lives that they forgot to make room for mine. I don't blame them. Life moves quickly. Children grow up. Families spread across states. Everyone has responsibilities, but that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. One day I realized that some of the people I missed most were still walking this earth. We just no longer belonged in each other's lives. That kind of grief is different. There is no funeral, no final goodbye, no closure, just silence. And silence can break a heart too. For a long time, I took these losses personally. I thought maybe I wasn't interesting enough anymore. Maybe I had become too old, too forgettable, too easy to leave behind. Then one evening, I sat alone looking through an old photo album. There were faces everywhere. People I loved, people who loved me, people whose stories had crossed mine for a season. Some stayed for decades, some stayed for only a few years. Yet every single one had left a mark. And suddenly I understood something. Not everyone is meant to stay forever. Some people are chapters, not the entire book. That realization didn't erase the pain, but it softened it, because instead of focusing on how the story ended, I started appreciating the fact that the story happened at all. The friendship happened, the love happened, the laughter happened, the memories happened, and nobody could take those things away. Still, I had one final lesson to learn, one that arrived only a week ago. A lesson delivered through another funeral, another goodbye, another person I loved lowered into the ground. As I sat in that church listening to familiar prayers, I expected to feel what I had always felt before: fear, dread, panic, the old terror of being left behind. But something unexpected happened. For the first time in my life, it didn't come. And what I felt instead would change the way I looked at the rest of my days. A week ago, I attended the funeral of one of my dearest friends. Her name was Margaret. We had known each other for over 40 years. 40 years. Think about that. 40 years of birthdays, phone calls, coffee dates, stories, laughter, advice. 40 years of showing up for each other. And then one afternoon, I found myself sitting in a church saying goodbye. As I watched her family cry, I expected to feel the same fear that had followed me my entire life. The fear that had lived inside me since I was 10 years old. The fear of losing people. But as I sat there quietly, something surprising happened. I felt sad. Of course I felt sad. I loved her. I miss her. I still do. But underneath the sadness, there was something else. Peace. For the first time in nearly a century, I wasn't afraid. On the drive home, I kept asking myself why. What had changed? Why wasn't I terrified anymore? And somewhere between the cemetery and my little house, I finally found the answer. I had spent most of my life preparing for loss, but loss had spent my life preparing me for acceptance. The thing I feared most had happened over and over and over again, and somehow I survived a single time, not because I was strong, not because I was brave, but because human hearts are built differently than we think. When we're young, we believe grief will destroy us. But grief doesn't destroy us. It reshapes us. The younger version of me wasted years worrying about people I hadn't even lost yet. I worried during family dinners. I worried during vacations. I worried during beautiful, ordinary moments. Instead of fully living them, I was busy fearing the day they would end. If I could sit beside that younger woman now, I would grab her hands and say, "Stop it now. Stop mourning people who are still alive. Stop ruining today's joy because tomorrow might hurt. Stop rehearsing tragedies that haven't happened. Stop treating every goodbye like a disaster, because one day you'll realize something important. Nothing lasts forever. Not youth, not health, not friendships, not marriages, not even life itself. And that isn't the tragedy. The tragedy is spending the time you do have being afraid of losing it. At 97 years old, I have learned that life was never asking me to hold on forever. Life was asking me to appreciate what I had while it was here. That's all. And somehow, that changes everything. These days, I spend my mornings differently. I sit near the window with a cup of tea. I watch the sunlight move across the room. I listen to the birds. I smile at old photographs, not because they make me sad, because they remind me how lucky I was, lucky to love, lucky to be loved, lucky to have known people worth missing. Do you know something I've discovered? The pain of missing someone is actually proof that something beautiful existed. You cannot miss what never mattered. You cannot grieve what never touched your heart. Every tear I've cried came from love, and when I look at it that way, even grief feels different. It feels less like an enemy, and more like evidence. Evidence that someone wonderful was here. Sometimes younger people ask me what it's like to be 97. I usually smile, because they're expecting me to talk about aches and pains. Instead, I tell them this: the hardest part of aging isn't watching your face change. It isn't needing help with certain things. It isn't moving slower. The hardest part is becoming the keeper of so many memories. You carry entire worlds inside you. People whose voices nobody else remembers. People whose laughter has disappeared from the earth. People who only exist because you still remember them. And yet, there is something beautiful about that responsibility, because as long as I remember them, a part of them remains. My husband remains. My parents remain. My friends remain. Margaret remains. Love leaves footprints, even after people are gone. And now, as I sit here at 97 years old, I know my own journey is nearing its end. That doesn't frighten me anymore. In fact, it feels strangely natural. I have lived a long life, a beautiful life, a heartbreaking life, a life filled with joy and loss, laughter and tears, beginnings and endings. Just like every meaningful life, I'm not waiting for death. I'm simply no longer running from it. When my time comes, I hope the people I leave behind remember one thing. Not how old I was, not what I owned, not what I accomplished. I hope they remember that I loved them, because in the end that's what remains. Not money, not possession, not achievements, only love. Love is the only thing that survives every goodbye. So if you're listening today and you're afraid of losing someone, please hear me carefully. Visit them, laugh with them, make memories with them, tell them you love them. But stop living in fear. Stop it now, because one day when you look back on your life, you'll discover something I learned at 97 years old. The people you lost were never the greatest tragedy. The greatest tragedy would have been failing to enjoy them while they were here. Thank you for listening to my story. And thank you for reminding me that even after losing so many people, life was still worth loving.